This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has addressed a message of congratulations to the Algerian people inside and outside the country on the occasion of the advent of the new year 2026. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the adoption by the Israeli parliament of amendments to the law aimed at suspending the activities of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA. And the United Nations has announced the extension of the Adre border crossing between Chad and Sudan for an additional 3 months, allowing humanitarian aid to continue reaching millions in the region of Darfur. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has congratulated the Algerian people on the advent of the new year 2026, affirming that the coming year will be a source of pride and honor for all Algerians, thanks to the achievements accomplished and the sacrifices made in various fields, so that Algeria may, in complete serenity, attain the rank of emerging countries. In his address to the Algerian people, women and men, on the occasion of the new year 2026, the President of the Republic extended to them his best wishes for health and well-being and wished them peace and prosperity to the dear homeland. The President added that the new year would be a source of pride and honor for all Algerian women and men, thanks to the achievements accomplished and the sacrifices made in various fields, enabling Algeria in complete serenity to attain the rank of emerging countries. He further reiterated his most sincere wishes to every Algerian inside and outside the country on the occasion of the new year, while also expressing hope for an end to the Zionist crimes against the Palestinian brotherly people in occupied Palestine and for a return to normal life in the West Bank, Gaza and Al-Quds. The President concluded by affirming that Algeria would remain free, proud and sovereign, paying tribute to the valiant martyrs and invoking Allah's peace and blessing upon all Algerians. Let's listen to the President of the Republic.
OCHA reported that since early December, 18 buildings has collapsed and over 110 others.
So let's shift now to the Middle East, where the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned the adoption by the Israeli parliament of amendments to the law aimed at suspending the activities of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA. The UN Secretary General spokesman, Stéphane Dujarric, said that the amendments were seeking to further undermine UNRWA's functioning capacity and preventing the UN agency from carrying through its activities. He stressed that the bill and its amendments were incompatible with the status and the international legal framework applicable to UNRWA and must be immediately repealed. The UN chief recalled that UNRWA was part and parcel of the UN system and was entirely covered by the UN Convention on Privileges and Immunities. The UN Secretary General reiterated his full support to UNRWA while recalling that the UN Court of Justice confirmed last October that the Israeli occupying authorities must fulfill its obligations and fully respect the UN Convention in the occupied Palestinian territory. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, described as outrageous the Israeli occupying authorities' threat to ban as from January 1st the activities of 37 humanitarian organizations in Gaza. He urged the international community to press the occupying authorities to reconsider the decision and warned that such arbitrary suspensions would further worsen the already intolerable situation for the Palestinian or the population in Gaza. The Israeli government justified this decision by the NGO's non-compliance with new registration rules denounced by the humanitarian organizations as likely to have a major impact on the distribution of aid in Gaza. The Israeli decision to revoke the licenses of NGOs operating in the occupied Palestinian Authority or territories, including Gaza, calling on the international community to reject the new restrictions imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities. It rejected the reasons behind the Israeli ban and affirmed that the NGOs were providing humanitarian, health and environmental support to the Palestinian people, particularly in the Gaza Strip, where the population is facing violence and famine. Still in the Middle East, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, has warned that hundreds of thousands of Gazans are still living in towns damaged by rain, wind, or waves, or in severely weakened buildings. Ms. OCHA has more details.
OCHA reported that since early December, 18 buildings has collapsed and over 110 others suffered partial damage. Humanitarian partners provided emergency shelter to more than 80,000 households, around 448,000 people, but recent storms affected an additional 65,000 households, increasing needs again. The UN Shelter Sector Group reported that over 1 million people in Gaza still need emergency assistance. UNICEF Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, Eduardo Beigbeder, said 6 children have died this month due to harsh conditions. Displaced families in worn-out tents or makeshift shelters face heavy rains, strong winds, and freezing temperatures, with humanitarian teams warning of risks for young children, especially the malnourished. In the same connection, the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed that the humanitarian situation in Gaza has reached catastrophic levels, worsened by winter conditions. Foreign Minister Ignacio Cassis supported a joint statement by ministers from Britain, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Iceland, Japan, Norway, Sweden and Switzerland, calling on Israeli authorities to ensure unhindered humanitarian access, lift excessive restrictions and open crossings for aid delivery. The statement expressed concern over 2 years of Israeli operations causing killings, starvation, destruction and displacement, while violations of the ceasefire from October 10th continue. In this context, the occupying authorities announced the suspension of 37 international humanitarian organizations in Gaza, including MSF, Handicap International, Oxfam and Mitzah du Monde, which could be barred from staff deployment and aid delivery. The UN humanitarian team in the occupied Palestinian territory urged Israeli authorities to reverse the decision, emphasizing the essential role of these NGOs, while agencies warned further restrictions could worsen the already out-of-control humanitarian crisis.
And the United Nations has announced the extension of the Adre border crossing between Chad and Sudan for an additional 3 months, allowing humanitarian aid to continue reaching millions in the Darfur region. Ms. Al-Sharfi reports again.
The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, emphasized that maintaining humanitarian access through the crossing is crucial to saving lives and meeting the urgent needs of affected populations. In this regard, the Sudanese government confirmed that the crossing would remain open for aid organized by international relief agencies from January 1st to March 31st, 2026. Sudan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the extension underscores the government's commitment to ensuring the delivery of humanitarian assistance and facilitating coordination with aid organizations in accordance with international humanitarian law. The ministry added that the decision follows atrocities committed by the Rapid Paramilitary Support Forces RSF in El Fasher, Abi Nusah and Hajlaj, which claimed thousands of Sudanese lives and expressed hope that friendly countries and humanitarian organizations would expedite support to those in need. Meanwhile, the United States Senior Advisor for Arab and African Affairs, Mas'ad Boulous, called on all Sudanese parties to honor their commitments to ensure unobstructed aid access and to establish a humanitarian truce to allow more assistance and lay the foundation for lasting peace. The humanitarian crisis in Sudan has been worsening due to the ongoing conflict between the Sudanese army and the RSF since April 2023, which has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions.
Still in Africa, the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, has announced that an intensification of fighting in the east of the country, particularly in South Kivu province, has left more than 1,500 civilians dead since the beginning of December. According to an official statement, the violence has mainly been concentrated along the Kamanyola-Uvira axis in South Kivu, where armed operations have caused significant population displacement. The authorities indicate that more than 500,000 people have been forced to flee their localities due to the clashes and persistent insecurity, as the front line has gradually shifted southwards, affecting several areas of South Kivu, notably Uvira, Fizi, and Mwega. This development is attributed to military actions by armed elements operating in the region in violation of existing commitments and international humanitarian law. The government reaffirmed its determination to restore state authority nationwide and to pursue accountability through diplomatic and judicial channels amid decades of recurrent violence in eastern DRC, further aggravated by the resurgence of the March 23 movement M23 since late 2021. Somalia officially assumes today the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the current month of January, succeeding Slovenia. Somalia's permanent representative to the United Nations will hold a press conference tomorrow, Friday, during which he will brief the accredited press on the Council's program of work after the Security Council approves the program at a morning session on the same day. The Council is composed of 15 countries, including 5 permanent members, namely Russia, France, China, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, and 10 non-permanent member states elected for a 2-year term by the General Assembly, according to the approved geographical distribution, namely, in addition to Somalia, Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama, Bahrain, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, Latvia, and Colombia. And finally, the Algerian national football team has defeated Equatorial Guinea 3-1 in the final round of Group E at the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations AFCON 2025. The goals for Algeria were scored by Zinedine Belid, Faris Shaibi and Ibrahim Maza, while Equatorial Guinea's sole goal came from Emilio Nsue. This victory marks Algeria's 3rd consecutive win or victory following their successes against Sudan and Burkina Faso, allowing them to finish the group stage with a perfect record. So good luck for our national football team for the upcoming games. And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, special program devoted to Sudan, compiled and presented by my colleague Masoud Sharfi. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. As 2025 comes to a close, we take a moment to reflect on the major global events and crises that shaped this year. In this special program, we turn our attention to Sudan, a country that during 2025 stood at the center of one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises and security emergencies. From the ongoing conflict and its impact on civilians to repeated warnings voiced at the United Nations and the Security Council, we look back at a year marked by violence, displacement, and international concern. We also examine the deepening humanitarian crisis and the urgent calls for action to prevent further collapse. This is Sudan in 2025, a year of war, warnings, and unanswered appeals. In 2025, the war in Sudan showed no meaningful sign of resolution. Battle continued across Khartoum, Darfur, Kordofan, and other regions, and the violence escalated in scope and brutality. In October 2025, the city of El Fasher in North Darfur became the scene of what was described as a massacre that has claimed hundreds of civilians' lives, a stark marker of how the conflict has evolved into targeted violence with ethnic dimensions. The year also saw mass killings in displacement camps. UN human rights officials reported that more than 1,000 civilians were killed in just 3 days during an attack on a camp earlier in this year. Towns and villages were repeatedly engulfed by fighting, forcing waves of civilians to flee and swelling the ranks of displaced. Fierce fighting has repeatedly engulfed towns and villages, and those fleeing violence have greatly increased the number of the displaced. The war has destroyed essential services, obliterated neighborhoods, and deepened a climate of fear and rampant disorder. For millions of Sudanese, daily life in 2025 became a question of survival rather than stability. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for an end to the violence in Sudan, a halt to weapons inflow, and accountability for the crimes perpetrated against civilians in El Fasher.
The horrifying crisis in Sudan is spiraling out of control. For over 18 months, El Fasher and the surrounding areas in North Darfur have been an epicenter of suffering, hunger, violence and displacements. And since the rapid support forces entered El Fasher, the situation is growing worse by the day. Hundreds of thousands of civilians are trapped. People are dying of malnutrition, disease and violence. And we are hearing continued reports of violations of international humanitarian law and human rights. Indiscriminate attacks and targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, horrifying instances of gender-based and ethnic violence, and now credible reports of widespread executions since the rapid support forces entered the city. I once again call an immediate end to this unimaginable violence. And one thing that is essential to stop the fighting is to make sure that no more weapons come into Sudan. And that is another essential objective. And at the same time, we need to create mechanisms of accountability because the crimes that are being committed are so horrendous that they cannot benefit from any kind of impunity.
Throughout 2025, Sudan remained at the forefront of the discussions at the United Nations. Senior UN officials repeatedly warned the Security Council and global audiences that the war had turned large parts of the country into what they described as hellscape, with civilians facing relentless violence and minimal protection. Algeria, speaking at the Security Council, consistently drew attention to the deteriorating humanitarian situation. Speaking on behalf of the A3+ group during a Security Council meeting on the situation in Sudan, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ammar Ben Jama, highlighted reports of mass atrocities, the targeting of hospitals and schools, and the urgent need to scale up humanitarian assistance while ensuring accountability for crimes committed.
Almost 1,000 days have passed since the outbreak of the conflict in the dear nation of Sudan, a conflict that continues to have devastating consequences for innocent civilians, including women and children. We are appalled by the recent development in the Kordofan region, with reports of mass atrocities committed, and civilian infrastructure, particularly hospitals, schools, and even kindergartens, have become the target of aerial vehicles. We call for continued coordination with international partners for the delivery of humanitarian assistance to all those affected by the conflict. The alarming developments in Kordofan, combined with the already dire situation in Darfur, have naturally led to increased humanitarian needs. We therefore call for an urgent scaling up of international funding. The solution to the conflict cannot be reached only through the use of force. Only inclusive dialogue and genuine negotiation can lead to a durable solution. Only that is Sudanese-led and Sudanese-owned. The committed atrocities cannot go unpunished. The massacres perpetrated during this conflict must be met with accountability.
Despite these warnings, deep divisions among Security Council members continued to limit decisive action. While condemnations and briefings multiplied, enforcement mechanisms remained weak, and civilians on the ground saw little relief from the violence. If diplomatic efforts struggled, the humanitarian crisis inside Sudan reached catastrophic proportions in 2025. The United Nations described Sudan as one of the largest humanitarian and displacement emergencies in the world, with more than 30 million people in need of assistance. In a stark illustration of how rapidly the situation continues to deteriorate, the United Nations reported that more than 10,000 people were displaced in just 3 days in North Darfur and South Kordofan due to intensified fighting. The International Organization for Migration said over 7,000 people fled towns in North Darfur after they were taken over by the rapid paramilitary support forces, while more than 3,000 fled the besieged city of Kadugli in South Kordofan, pushing the total number of people displaced since the conflict began to more than 11 million. The World Food Programme warned of a massive humanitarian crisis, with fighting blocking life-saving aid to millions. Food insecurity deepened as conflict and economic collapse spread hunger across multiple regions. Malnutrition, particularly among children, rose sharply, while disease outbreaks such as cholera spread amid the collapse of water and sanitation systems. Aid agencies stressed that many of the deaths recorded in 2025 were preventable with proper access and funding. Radio Algeria International contacted the advocacy manager for the Norwegian Refugee Council in Sudan, Ms. Mathilde Vu, who described 2025 in Sudan as a devastating year for civilians, marked by extreme violence, siege-like conditions, famine, disease outbreaks, and what she called a growing sense of abandonment by the international community.
2025 was absolutely terrible for civilians in Sudan. We've seen extreme levels of violence, whereby cities and displacement camps were besieged, were starved, were shelled and attacked on a weekly basis, like it is the case in northern Darfur and also in Kadugli, to the point that civilians had to resort to eat animal food, cow skin, boiled leaves. Many of them tried to flee and were caught on the way by armed groups, killed, raped, tortured. A lot of heartbreaks in families with huge numbers of family separation. We've seen famine being confirmed one more year in Sudan, which means that Sudan is one of the few countries in the world right now where people simply die of hunger. We've seen also an unprecedented cholera outbreak that killed thousands of people all across the countries, including in the capital Khartoum, as people were trying to return and reestablish and couldn't find, service provision, water provision, etc. And as we now approaching the 1,000 days of the war, I think that the Sudanese are exhausted, are being left out by the international community. We're still very far from any resolution, with the warring parties and the backers continuing to betray the rules of war and violate the basics of international humanitarian law, such as the protection of civilians and the unfettered humanitarian access for people.
Behind every number are millions of individual stories of suffering. In 2025, Sudanese children remained out of school for a second consecutive year, raising fears of a lost generation deprived of education and normalcy. The UN and partner agencies reported staggering levels of displacement, with women and girls facing particularly severe protection risks, including sexual violence, forced marriage, and gender-based abuse. Families were forced to shelter in makeshift camps or damaged homes, often without enough food, clean water, or medical care. The United Nations repeatedly stressed that civilians were not just victims of war, but often deliberate targets, and that protecting them must be a priority of any peace effort. Amid the collapse of formal institutions, civil society and grassroots responders played a vital role throughout 2025. Volunteers networks, including the widely reported emergency response rooms, ERRs, locally organized centers set up to coordinate rapid assistance in conflict-affected areas, risked their lives to deliver food, healthcare, and psychological support to millions. These groups operate under constant threat and provided crucial aid where the international efforts struggled to reach. Despite their courage and impact, with ERRs supporting dozens of millions across Sudan, these initiatives faced severe funding gaps and operational challenges. UN officials and aid partners repeatedly praised local responders' resilience, but warned that community efforts alone cannot compensate for a lack of sustained international support. These grassroots networks highlighted both the strength and desperation of Sudanese communities in 2025, acting as lifelines amid the collapse of basic services and governance. Politically, 2025 marked by repeated attempts at negotiations, but trust between the warring parties remained fragile. In late December, Sudan's Prime Minister Camille Idriss presented a comprehensive peace initiative to the United Nations Security Council, calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities, a UN-monitored ceasefire, the withdrawal of the rapid paramilitary support forces from occupied areas, and a supervised disarmament process.
Our nation, as you have rightly established this morning, has paid an unbearable price in human lives and in the tearing apart of its social fabric. Cities have been reduced to ruins, families to exile, and the hope itself has been placed under siege. The government of Sudan Peace Initiative is born not from illusion, but from necessity. Sudan does not ask for sheer sympathy. I must make this point very clear. We are not here to ask for sheer sympathy. It asks for partnership in securing peace, justice, and dignity for our people. Our initiative is homemade, not imposed upon us. It is not about winning a war. It is about ending a cycle of violence that has failed Sudan for decades. The government of Sudan Peace Initiative offers a clear test of our collective resolve. A ceasefire that can be monitored, disarmament that can be enforced, justice that is not selective, and reconciliation that is not superficial. Sudan seeks neither impunity nor endless war. It seeks a just peace anchored in law and safeguarded by the international community. You are the international community. This collective assembly of the Security Council is the full representation of the international community.
However, the RSF signaled resistance to key elements of the proposal, raising serious doubts about its viability and the prospects for a lasting settlement. At the same time, regional dynamics and external interests continued to shape the conflict, further complicating mediation efforts. Despite renewed diplomatic engagement, divisions within the Security Council once again limited decisive action. While condemnations, peace appeals, and humanitarian briefings multiplied, enforcement mechanisms remained weak and largely symbolic. By the end of 2025, peace remained elusive, and the international community faced a growing question about its ability and willingness to advance a negotiated end to the war, while ensuring civilian protection and accountability for violations of international humanitarian law. As 2025 draws to a close, Sudan's story remains one of resilience amid devastation and of urgent appeals met with limited action. The United Nations and humanitarian agencies have repeatedly warned that without stronger international engagement, sustained aid, and a genuine inclusive political process, the suffering of the Sudanese people will only worsen. Looking ahead to 2026, the question is no longer whether Sudan needs attention, but whether the world is ready to respond in time to protect civilians, to support peace, and to prevent the loss of an entire generation. You have been listening to Radio Algeria International's special end-of-year program on Sudan. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned.